Yeah, we were mentioning just now about like a breaking point, and I experienced that last year, last 2 years. Felt like I always describe it as a crash, like I feel like I crashed, and then I felt like this urgency and desperacy to, okay, I need to understand what is going on, like
I just need to tell someone about it. And maybe someone can tell me like, oh, maybe a better way to cope with this stress is to, talk about it, or maybe breathe through that, or maybe talk to the person that's making you feeling a bit stressed at work, maybe.
Hi, welcome back to The Usual Place. Now, there's a lot of conversation and resources about mental health, but within that space, there's one area that I'm particularly intrigued by, and that is therapy. So there's memes about therapy, personal essays about how therapy reshapes perspective, and therapists dishing out advice on TikTok about attachment styles and how therapy isn't just for broken people. Now, it's even crept into the online dating space where people openly state that they are in therapy, which is supposed to be taken as a green flag. So is going to therapy the way to go for good mental health? Now, to help me unpack my questions, I have Raquel Ang, who is a counselor and also the co-founder of the IHearU App, which offers mental wellness services to people to connect with professionals at different price points. And I also have on the show with me today, pop and R&B singer-songwriter Layyi, who has a new song called Lovin Me. You feature on this song when it's part of a new mental health campaign by McDonald's. So welcome to The Usual Place, both of you. And we're going to get to therapy in a bit. But before we get to that, I have to tell you guys, stick around to the end because I have something to give you. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Okay, maybe break it down for us. Like, what's the different levels in the space?
And there's different levels like a counselor and therapist.
Yeah, what's the difference? And maybe people might not be so clear on that.
How I would say a therapist is when they are more psychodynamic trained. They dwell a little bit more about the past. But counselor is a little bit more basic. Like we do a broad spectrum of therapy techniques, like behavioral and very present and future centered. Yeah, so this is how, different people really like differentiate it very differently, but that's how I differentiate it. Therapy is more for the past, and then for counselors more for the present, and a little bit more goal-oriented for the future. Yeah.
So, what, Layyi, do you have something to add?
Yeah, that makes sense. No, because the therapy center, I guess, that I go to, it's called Counselling and Care Center. And then so I speak to a counselor, I think. So I always thought this was counseling, like I wasn't going for therapy until like I actually asked my counselor one day, actually, what is this? Like, is this counseling or what? And I remember her saying that under the word therapy, it's like the therapy is a huge umbrella, and under therapy there are lots of other like psychotherapy and things like that. And then she told us, well, actually what we're doing is psychotherapy now. I was like,
I'm so
interesting.
confused because it's like, do people use it interchangeably, or like what's the terminology that we should use? And so thanks for clarifying that. Yes.
No problem.
Yes, but are you able to answer my question? Is therapy for everyone, or when should we consider going for therapy?
I feel like therapy it's not for everyone, but it's also for everyone. I feel like it's also based on openness and eagerness for change. So it's not a one size fits all, but it's really based on personal, whether you are open and willing for change.
How does one know when they're open and willing for change? Is it like a personal thing? Or?
I think it's also timing. Like for personal experience, right? Like I reached a point where breaking point where I felt like I couldn't bottle up all these emotions anymore. I was going through a divorce, and my parents was also going through a divorce. And I'm like, oh my gosh, where do all these thoughts and feelings go? And my friends were they could help in a certain sense. My parents were going through a divorce, so like they weren't the support for me. So I was at that breaking point, and I was deciding like, you know what, maybe therapy it's an option for me to go to. So I feel like it's also a lot about timing. Like, what about you, Layyi? I heard that you went for therapy too.
Yeah. Well, actually very similar. I feel like I started going for therapy because of a breaking point. But I've always felt like I needed to go because I'm very aware that I grew up in a very, very rough family background. So I've always felt like I knew that there was something missing in me. Like I knew that I was off somewhere or that I just needed help, needed to understand myself better. But, nothing in life really kind of like drove me to, okay, therapy is, because I think back then is also what I know about therapy was that it's so expensive and I was so young. I obviously have no money to, and I wasn't expecting my parents to pay for it also. So therapy
Did you
was
tell
just
them
like,
that you were going to therapy?
Actually, no. Actually, even now, I don't think they know.
Oh, actually, I'm curious. Why did you just go to your friends? Like both of you, like why didn't you just go to your friends? Because you were talking about not talking to your parents. You couldn't talk to your parents, and you were also like a breaking point. Why not turn to your friends like for help?
That's a good
Like
question.
to sound them out, actually.
I think friends are a great support, like for validation and support, right? But therapy was like another realm where you could delve deeper into your thoughts. You could feel not judged, in that space. And sometimes like you don't want to tell your friends too much because like you haven't really processed those emotions and thoughts yet. And therapy is just that space where this person is it's you don't know that person. He's a complete stranger that you're just pouring out, and they wouldn't give you back the little bit of judgment that your friend might give. Like so, I feel like it was a really safe space for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like sometimes, in my experience growing up, when you go through a lot at a young age, sometimes you are also, I guess emotionally, you are forced to be more mature than your peers. And I find that sometimes my peers cannot really relate to what I'm going through, and that's why they don't really know what to say. So I might get the initial sense of comfort that, okay, I mean, I have someone to talk to maybe, but then after that, I would want to understand myself a bit better, and they cannot provide the understanding, So at some point, I mean, they help to a certain level, but then after that, at some point, like you want to get it actually solved, like, yeah. So then, so I think huge reason why I didn't turn to my friends is because of that. Yeah.
Okay, so now that we've established the whole therapy thing, was there a moment where, do you remember where you're like, okay, this is something that I really need to do? Like, were y'all like sitting on it for a little bit before, or were you like, no, I need a therapist or a counselor or someone to talk to?
Well, that's a great question.
Because I think like, sometimes people sit on it like for a couple of months and like, because I don't know if it's a stigma thing which we can address later, but yeah, I don't know. What was it like for you? Were you like very determined to go to therapy, see a counselor, or you're like,
I think for me, I think growing up also financially, I didn't have the means. There were kind of like the barrier of entry is higher, I feel like. I think the biggest one is financially, but also there was the stigma. So in the back of my mind, it's always a lingering thought that, yeah, I want to go one day for sure, like to just like understand myself better, get these like knots undone, But I think, yeah, we were mentioning just now about like a breaking point, and I experienced that last 2 years. Felt like I always describe it as a crash, like I feel like I crashed, and then I felt like this urgency and desperacy to, okay, I need to understand what is going on, yeah, and I guess that helped with like the courage of pushing through all the stigma and the fear and all. I just get it. It's really like if you're sick, you just go straight to the doctor. Like you don't think about anything else, Yeah, so that was what drove me to go for therapy. Yeah.
Yeah, for me, I waited for 2 years. So yeah, so I did have that waiting out, but it's also like for like financially, like at that point in time, you just felt like you couldn't afford it, and also a little bit of stigma, right? Like I went through a divorce like 2 years ago, and 2 years later, I decided like, you know what, I should go to therapy because my parents' marriage was also failing, and I'm like, what is going on? And I just don't want to feel like this anymore. I just breaking point, right? Oh my God, I cannot feel like this every day. I just feel horrible, asking myself all these questions, having all these feelings that is like clashing with each other. And I'm like, cannot leh. Yeah, so like, and even when I booked the appointment and leading up to the therapy session, right? I was like, oh my gosh, he's gonna think I'm mad. He's gonna think I'm depressed. He's gonna come up with all this. He's gonna send me to IMH, that kind of thing.
Was that a worry? Like,
yeah,
like legit, like you were gonna go to IMH?
Like, yeah, it was legit. Cause like before, just like an hour before therapy, I called my friend. I was having a panic attack. I was like, oh my God, they're gonna send me IMH. They think I'm crazy or what? But you know what? That was after going for therapy, right? It was life changing. I was like, yeah, actually it's not as bad as it was, like what I was thinking.
Yeah.
And probably I was over catastrophizing. I mean, at that point in time, I didn't have my education in counselling yet. So like this whole anxiety was like really defeating. Like, oh my God, I want to go for therapy, but I cannot. My whole body just cannot. And I'm just like falling apart before even going to therapy. But it was life-changing, yeah. And now I'm just like, if I can go for therapy every month, that'll be best.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh my gosh. Like, well, but thank you for sharing. It must be really, really hard to go through so much.
Yeah, at that point in time. But it was a great change in life.
I'm very curious. What do you do during the 2 years that you were struggling with your feelings?
Like, I think I can cope. Like another day, you're like, okay, you know what? I survived the another day.
Okay.
Yeah. So
but were you just like going through the motion of things and like feeling everything at the same time?
I think I was going through grief lah, like, you know, drinking, partying, unhealthy habits, you know. And then I think, like when my parents' marriage was falling apart, I think that's when it hit the fan, right? I'm like, hey, like I was processing my own divorce, but my parents going through a divorce, I'm like, why is this? Is this like some generation curse or something like that? And you don't know how to process it, right? And then when someone sat there and listened to you and told you like, hey, you know, it's okay, that it's okay to feel this way. There are people who feel this way all the time. And it's so normal to feel that way when you're grieving. Like, why do you think it's not a normal reaction to cry when you are going through something sad? Why do you think you should be strong always? Like, you know, you start thinking like, yeah, why should I be strong always? Why can't I cry? Because I'm grieving. Why cannot, you know? Yeah, like you were saying, we were going to talk about stigma later.
Yeah,
right?
or we can talk about it now because it has come up already in our chat. And I was wondering, like, did y'all have any fears? Firstly, do you, okay, after this show, people know that you guys are going to therapy. Is there any stigma around telling people that you go to therapy regularly?
I mean, now, no. I'm like super bold.
You're like,
yeah, I go for therapy. You should too.
Yeah. Same, I think in when I tell people, I do kind of also encourage like, if you have not tried, it's like it's always good to kind of to try. I think there's not a lot of stigma with the younger people. I think amongst my peers and older, maybe like the millennials and older. Yeah, I think
what do we do? Okay, yes. Wait.
I do think, I have friends who, but I also think this, at least in my experience, it's like more millennial guys. Like they are the more oh, therapy great for you, you know, but not for me. Yeah, it's just like kind of like there's still that stigma of like if you go for therapy, you have a problem, you know. And I never actually fully kind of took on that kind of mindset in a sense until I actually went for therapy. I remember the first session, there were a few people in the room waiting for their turn.
You can see other people?
Yeah, it's like so because I go to a counselling center.
Oh, okay.
So there are people and there's a waiting area.
Is it? Different counsellors.
Correct. Okay. Different counsellors in that same vicinity. And I remember going there and there were people waiting for their turn. And for the first time I was self-conscious. I was like, oh, and then that whole stigma thing hit me at that moment. Like I felt, I remember thinking, all of us here have a problem and all of us like have some issues. That's why we're here to solve them, right? Like, so then it became really real to me that, that's what people might think that people are thinking of them. That's why they don't go for therapy. Yeah. But with the younger people, it's like, it's a buzzword, you know, they throw around like my therapist
Exactly,
said.
this is my point. This is why I wanted to do the episode because everybody's like, therapy, you need it, I need it, we should go to therapy, we should have friendship therapy, we should have couples therapy, we should have like...
It's in the songs, it's in... Like people write songs about it, or like, and they would say, who's a therapist? Fire a therapist, you know, like, or like, oh, I spoke to my therapist last week, or like, it's just like they throw it around a lot, you know, like it's. So I think
we will get to that. That will be my closing question to you, but that's very interesting about therapy speak in everyday life, right? But I wanted to ask you because you brought up the music. Have you written songs about therapy? Or
no. Not about therapy.
It hasn't seeped into your art yet.
Yeah, I guess so. Like, I also don't want to kind of throw it around as like a... I mean, I don't want it to be a stigma, but I also don't want to unnecessarily enthrone any, like, you know, enshrine something, you know, like therapy, and it's like whoa, it's, you know, it's great, but it's not something like I want to hide behind, you know, because I think sometimes when we over glorify these things, they become like a mask, they become like a shield. So then you know, everything that you do, you always have an excuse or like a shield, you know, like oh, I need to work this out in therapy. That's why I need to have. You know, I mean, you know, so like balance, you know, just balance.
Balance
Raquel,
is a great
how are
word.
the millennials taking to therapy? When you tell your friends,
I want
like,
to understand how the younger people are like very open to therapy now. Yeah, but millennials, right? We kind of grow up like thinking like only the problem kid in the family goes for therapy.
Yeah, it's like they it's almost like they view it as like really like a mental problem, like a mental issue.
like if you have a mental issue, then you go to therapy.
yeah.
That's the thinking.
Yeah, you have to have something very important and something critical to see a therapist. Yeah, like you depressed, then you can see therapist. Like you really, really depressed, then you can see therapist.
And I feel like their understanding of depression is the kind that like, you show it like
you show
like
it.
you are and then you can't eat, can't sleep. But actually a lot of depressed people don't even show these signs. Like
Yeah. So yeah, it kind of like this whole like the trouble kid sees therapy, right? Goes for therapy, like kind of perpetuates this perception that like only the weak go for therapy. And nobody wants to feel weak. Like I'm weak, that's why I go for therapy. And I mean, I think that's why I also had this whole panic attack going for therapy, right?
Oh, was it like the image thing that you were conscious about?
Not so much the image, but it's just more of the thinking. Like you judge yourself, like self-perception, self-judgment, critical. Like, hey, I'm not as good as I thought I was. I'm this flawed person. I thought I was okay, but I'm not okay. I'm like, I'm horrible. Like, I can't even control my own thoughts. Like, who are you? That kind of thing. Like, all these defeating thoughts, right?
yeah.
Maybe when we were growing up, we were always taught to like, hey, you know, just take it in. Like, you can do it. Like, push through. You cannot fail. That kind of thing. And always like, also a little bit about like self-perception, right? Wanting to always be good. Don't air your dirty laundries outside. Yeah. So I think a lot of that in millennials, we believe that we need to be perfect in some sense. So cannot go for therapy.
Meanwhile, Gen Z's are like, I'm showing you all of me.
I love it.
Yeah. They be flaunting their flaws. On TikTok and everything. It's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, I also want to know, is there a misconception, you know, Raquel, from being a practitioner in the mental health scene, right? Is there a misconception about counseling and therapy? Like it's too expensive, it's only for certain people. Like what's your take?
I mean, misconception. I think a lot of people believe that therapy is just talking, right? Like, but I really do believe that therapy is guided actualization. Like a therapist guides you to different questions to understand more about your thoughts, understand more about your emotions, why you're having these emotions, and why do you have these behaviors, right? And then they tell you different coping strategies that you can have for different circumstances and maybe give you tools, right? So other than just talking, right? There's actually like we introduce like coping tools for like your future, like how can you deal with this a little bit better? And I think it's just a great safe space for people to actually like explore more about themselves. So I feel like the biggest misconception would be like, I need to have a mental illness, then I can go for therapy. But I feel like anyone with a struggle, like I'm feeling stressed at work, I just need to talk it out. I just need to tell someone about it. And maybe someone can tell me like, oh, maybe a better way to cope with this stress is to, you know, talk about it, or maybe breathe through that. Or maybe talk to the person that's making you feeling a bit stressed at work, maybe, you know? Like I think the misconception also is also like how we don't want to feel a certain way about ourselves.
What do you mean?
Like the whole perfection I was talking about just now, like whole perfection, like I want to be perfect and everything. And going to therapy tells you that you're not perfect. Yeah. So like when you go for therapy, that actually like debunk all of that, right? It actually like cancels out, you know what, I don't need to be perfect. I don't need to be this good enough. I can be who I am, like whatever I am at this point of time.
So for both of you, is there one lesson that constantly comes up at therapy for you that, you know, that you learn from about yourself?
One lesson.
Yeah. Was there like a perception about yourself that was debunked in counseling and therapy?
Oh yeah. One Wow, so many. I would also actually describe therapy as life-changing for me. Like,
Yeah.
I would already consider myself a very self-aware person, but there is always like this glass ceiling, I would describe it.
Yeah.
Like, no matter how much I try to understand myself, there are still just like speculations, and I just couldn't break through that glass ceiling. I just feel like I'm still not hitting something until I went for therapy, and then I began to that was where I felt the glass ceiling broke, and I was like, oh, this is why. And then I guess from there, I explore so many themes, right? But I guess one overarching theme that I can see a very, very clear pattern of in my life is a very, very huge sense of this imposter syndrome. We understand imposter syndrome as like usually when you come into like a group dynamic or an environment where you feel like you don't belong, right? So I feel this on a massive scale. Like I feel like I feel like I need to justify my existence. Like I need to work for it. Like if I'm here in this environment, if I am whatever it is, any group dynamic at all, even with friendships, I will feel like I have to contribute. It has to be justified why I'm here. Every good thing that happens to me has to be justified also. And I guess what fuels or a facet of this imposter syndrome is also this feeling of shame, of just like, I'm just never good enough. Everything that I do, right, if it's not up to par, I will walk around with shame. Because I want to alleviate that shame, I have to perform. I have to be the best at every single thing. Yeah, so it's this constant imposter syndrome. Yeah, and it makes me it's very, very lonely. It's like, and if I didn't go for therapy, I wouldn't have figured this out on my own. I feel like I wouldn't have been able to see this. So this is just one of the many, many things that have come up
in therapy about yourself.
Yeah,
It's
really.
interesting.
Like, imposter syndrome is a real thing. Yeah. I think for me, right, like I think I was dealing a lot with my trauma. Like I think my most recent therapy session with my counselor, right, like she taught me that my trauma, I can love my trauma, I can care for my trauma. So, and that was a whole different perspective for me. Cause like this trauma was I feel like it was making me act out in different ways, especially in the relationship and interpersonal space, right? Like, why would I feel so troubled when someone says this to me? And that was all trauma. Like your body remembers the hurt, and therefore sometimes in different situations when that hurt kind of presents itself, you kind of act in that sense, in a very negative sense, right? And then a lot of shame, right? In when you tell that to your therapist and you're like, why am I like that? I thought I was over it. It was already like 5 years, 6 years already. Why am I still acting the way I'm acting, right? And it's just horrible. You just like cry and everything. And then we did something where she was like, hey, you know what? Let's revisit trauma, right? How are you when you're in the trauma state? Like how do you look like and everything? And we explored that. And then she was like, do you think you can love that trauma person, that you down there? And I was like, huh? Like I don't want that trauma person. Like, why would I want to be associated? But that's you. You are that person, right?
Yeah.
She was like, do you think you can care for it? And then slowly we were exploring how every day you can love on that trauma person, that trauma you know. What can you speak to this trauma person? And I'm like, wow.
That was actually the most mind-blowing part for me when I went for therapy. My first session, I remember when I went for my first session, I was really desperate, like for some relief, some answer, I was very, very troubled. And that was the first thing she did with me. And I think she educated me by saying that this is afterwards, like after a few sessions, she told me that what we actually did is called like externalization, where you look at yourself as a third person. Like, so she actually put a chair in front of me just to like help me visualize it. Like if young Lay, young Esther, she's sitting in front of you right now, like how does she look like, you know? And it was I would say it's the first time in my life, right, that I've ever felt compassion for myself. You know, because I understand that you understand that emotion. I understand compassion for other people, but I've never had that feeling for myself, and it was the first time. And I remember seeing myself there, right? Like just, as I guess looking at my inner child from the outside, I was this torn and tattered kid with bruises and like I looked like I was abused, you know. And that was also the first time in my life that I realized this is who I really am on the inside, and this is how I've been treating myself. This is how much I've been neglecting myself. That's why you act out of character, right? You suddenly do things that you just do irrational things, and you're like, why? You know, like I know in my mind this is not right, or like this is not my values. This is not who I am. But like I just act differently suddenly, and then that causes the crashes or like the bad decisions you make in life. And that was revelational. I was like, well, that changed my life. Yeah, it's just the first session.
First session.
How long was the session?
Like 1 hour, but it felt like an eternity. Like felt like
That 1 hour will change your life.
Can I ask you, how did y'all pick your counselor or therapist?
Wow.
Like, how, I mean, for someone who's watching the episode, they might want to know, right? Like, if
I didn't pick, no. I just went there and then they assigned me one.
and you vibe with that person.
Yeah.
Like, oh.
Yeah, thank goodness. Thank goodness. Yeah, she's so good.
That's great. Because I have a lot of friends that can't find the right counselor for them. And they just change like 5 or 6 times. And there's a lot of money spent. For me, like, I think I had a referral because one of my friend also went through a divorce before, like, and then she was like, hey, I think you should talk to somebody, yeah? Then I was like, okay. And then contemplate for like the next few months. And then I was like, okay, like, let's go. And then like I went for the therapist. But like along the way, as life changes, I also switched my therapist. Yeah. So
what made you decide to switch?
I think I was at a different point. I wanted to work on different things. So the first one I had was a psychologist, which maybe for me, I just felt a little bit too deep at that point in time. I just wanted someone to like hear me out. But it was very in-depth and it was a bit overwhelming. So yeah, so I wanted a bit more more friendship, more like a long-standing, like I want like track records, like let's track my progress along the way. But maybe my first psychologist was more like, today we talk about what you have today. And then it wasn't like they see your history, that kind of thing. So I wanted something more consistent. Yeah. So I wanted to see progress. I have millennials lah, huh? Yeah. We need to see progress.
It's good. It's good. Yeah.
Can I ask y'all how much y'all spend on therapy?
I'm very fortunate. Like the center that I go to, they look at, because I'm self-employed and a freelancing, so they actually look at they ask you to send in like your statements, you know, and then they will kind of like prorate it from there. Yeah, so they made it affordable for me.
Wow.
So I pay like less than 100 each session.
Wow.
Yeah. So if not, I won't be able to afford it. And and I go every month. Every month I see my therapist. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited. And I'll be like, I missed last month, and then I'll go to her. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, because I love it. I really enjoy it. Yeah, I really do. So I'll be like, hello, I forgot. I'm so sad I couldn't do it last month. But yeah, I spent.
Oh, that's great every month.
Yeah.
I mean, I would love that. For my first, I think it was around 300. And then my current therapist, I pay around 200. Yeah, so she's very suitable for me, and I mean, fits my price range. But yeah.
Actually, in the market, what is the price range for like counselors and therapists?
I think there are like centers like hers that they consider your financial, and then they provide like below 100. But I would say like a professional would be around from 200 all the way to 3, and maybe sometimes 500. I know of a friend that is going for a $500 therapy. I mean, but it fits her, and it fits her budget. And finding the right person is really important, like to feel comfortable, to feel like you're safe. And that's invaluable, right? Like you feel safe with that person.
Yeah.
Because you said that you like going for therapy. Like, do you feel like you might want to stop at any point in the future?
So far, I've not felt that yet. I think it's more my therapist who wants to kind of like get me to come late. But I'm like, no, I want to come every month. Does it give you some sort of stability in your schedule? Like, is that what it is? I think I'm just enjoying the whole journey of understanding myself. Like being fascinated and being like, I think because maybe as a person, I like to learn. Yeah, I like to learn about things, learn about myself, learn about people. So yeah, it's just been very fulfilling for me. And I've actually, I feel like after understanding myself better and I take steps to change and seeing that progress is also like something that I enjoy, you know. So yeah, and she's so right by saying that it's not easy to find someone that you feel safe talking to, and being dishonest with the details about your life, because they kind of, I guess you kind of have to be really honest when you are in therapy. If not, it beats the purpose. So so once you find that someone, right, it's like it's like every month I have one it's like I have a time with my oasis, you know, like a safe space, like to so I gather all my thoughts for the month, like, hey, how do I regulate myself? Like was there anything that was off and I want to understand better? Yeah. So then I think last Monday, was it this Monday 11th? I think on the 11th I had another session. So I was like asking her about certain reactions that I had, like, and I want to understand better. So things like that. Yeah. So I was like, oh, why did I feel this way? Then I'll just write it down and I'll ask her about it. Yeah. Then we will decide on that day what we want to unpack.
So can I ask you, so you've been in therapy for a couple of years?
Yeah, a couple of years.
Okay.
2 years.
2 years? Okay. And Layyi, you've been in therapy
Since last September.
Okay. So about a year.
About a year.
Okay. So my question was something actually you brought up earlier, which is the terms that we use in therapy, right? So like there's boundaries, there's like trauma dumping, there's like gaslighting and like self-care. It's kind of like part of daily conversation nowadays. Has therapy speak like affected the way you see things? Or do you find yourself hearing more people like use these terms, and is it okay or not okay? Like,
I feel like there's pros and cons. So I think the current generation, I think because of TikTok, I guess I hear so many of these terms, like they throw it around again, like a lot of buzzwords. They keep throwing these things around. The good thing is that it becomes less of a stigma for the people, Gen Z and below. I think like it's not like a huge barrier to entry. But then the downside is that it's so loosely thrown around. Sometimes I feel like we're like because of social media, right? We're kind of oversensitized, like kind of we're overly sensitive, and then whenever people just act a little bit like just does something a little bit off, then we just gaslight, you know, and we're just like very quick to call people out, and then I think they get a thrill from that, you know, like okay, I'm self-aware, I am like woke and I understand people better, I understand myself better, you know, like it's like a trophy. So I see people online, right? It's more like they are wearing their scars out as like a, I don't know, like a trophy, like something to be proud of. And yes, we don't want any shame, but it's also like the thing that I was talking about, like they kind of like enshrining and their pain. And a lot of these people online, they self-diagnose also. It's like, I think it's my ADHD kicking in. It's like I'm missing my therapist. It's like, but a lot of the times they're not actually diagnosed, right? So there are pros and cons, you know, like and so and I guess if it's thrown around so loosely, then you don't take the extra effort to go and educate yourself actually what they are, and like and if you actually need to get a diagnosis for these certain things, then I think it's like a lot of misinformation, you know. So pros and cons, I think.
I mean, I agree with Layyi about the pros and cons. Like the pros is like learning so much more about all the different mental illness, right? And the terms, like I learned so much from the internet while I was taking my education in counselling, where like different, and it's all like bite-sized, so it's like very easy, and it gives you coping strategies, and somehow with the algorithm it helps you to, like, today you feel anxious and something came out like, hey, 5 coping tips for anxiety. You're like, yay. But there are also terms like gaslighting, like, hey, I need my boundaries and everything that, and trauma, like trauma is a word that is like overgeneralized and oversimplified sometimes, like for someone going through like true real trauma, right? Like and also like if you're like, for example, if you're acting out somewhere and someone like, hey, you trauma, like you'll be like, hey, like you know, like is that another form of gaslighting, you know, like
like overcomplicated.
Yeah, so like the cons is like oversimplifying a term. And yeah, we need an extra step to discern, right? To understand the terms properly rather than just using it simply off our head. Yeah, I think it can be very hurtful. Like, hey, you gaslighting me.
Yeah.
Like, you trauma dumping on me.
Yeah.
Like
It's I think it is really clear. I don't know, at least in my experience, there's like a clear kind of line of the level of understanding between the generations. Like I think like for the Gen Zs, they have this like hyper kind of like awareness of, right? Yeah. And then they would kind of use their scars and their traumas as like a shield and also a trophy. And then if it's in a workplace or whatever, that they're not performing up to par, then they'll bring up those traumas like, oh, I'm acting this way because I had trauma with whatever. And then not to minimize their pain or like as in to try to kind of like look down on it or make light of it, but you know, like oftentimes they use it as like an excuse for not performing the way they should, right? When in the millennials, they kind of like need a little bit more understanding. They kind of like that's kind of what I've you know, like trauma dumping. Like I think in our generation, in the millennials, we don't have. I don't think I've ever heard that term growing up. It's just that if someone is sad and they tell you that they're sad, and it's just normal. What it's just you know, conversation. You know,
As in, we won't say they're trauma dumping on us.
yeah, we would just say that they're just expressing the, you know, like there wasn't like that concept at all. I think growing up.
yeah, there's a word called trauma boasting now also.
Oh yeah.
They just compare their trauma.
Like who's sadder?
But then also as a counselor, right, I try not to put these labels. While labels are like it helps someone, it sets someone free, right? Knowing that, hey, actually all I've been through is actually anxiety. That word is like, oh, actually I'm not crazy. It's just anxiety, right? But also like putting these labels is also like I try not to do that with my clients because like let's talk about you and why you are feeling that way, right? Like these are your thoughts, these are your emotions. Like, why should I put, hey, you know, you gaslighting, you trauma. But let's talk about it as a general, you as a person. How do you feel about having the anxiety? How do you feel about those thoughts? You know, like before we can even go into labeling, I would say like maybe in the third session, I'll be like, hey, you know, maybe I observed this, but you know, from the start, like we don't go straight into like, hey, I think you drama. You trauma. Oh, I think you anxious person.
Yeah.
You know, like that's very judgmental also. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Was there anything else y'all wanted to add on to about therapy? Like having this conversation. What's your final take on whether people should or should not go for therapy at all?
Yeah, I think it's very individualized, right? But I mean, I personally would believe that everybody should go for therapy. Like, because like even the smallest thing you can talk about, and there's a lot of price points now, right? In Singapore, there's like the affordable one like Layyi to like the professional one that my friend goes to, that $500. But like even like small, I wouldn't say small issues, like even like things that are troubling you today and you woke up and you need to talk to someone about it. It's better to air it out than to just keep it all in, right? So I would always believe that everyone can try going for therapy.
Yeah.
It's not a no-no, you know?
Yeah, same. I would tell my friends, or if you haven't tried, you should go at least once. Because I think I feel like it's useful to pick out patterns. Yeah. So when you go for therapy, or rather sometimes you might think something that you're going through is really, really small. Like it's not affecting me that much, or like it affected me today, but I'm gonna be okay tomorrow. But I think when you go for therapy, right, I think it helps you see certain patterns that you have. Like, why do you go through this particular thing at this particular time in this particular setting all the time, you know? And then that deeper understanding actually helps to I guess elevate your life, you know? Like it doesn't have to be like therapy doesn't have to be like a medic, like you are hurt, so I'm gonna come and heal you. It can be really more even like an educational thing for yourself. Like it's more of like how can it's like when you're meeting somebody, right, for the first time and you're learning to love them, they have to communicate to you like how they want to be loved, or like or you have to learn about what they like and what they don't like. I think going for therapy is the same. I think going for therapy is like going on a date with yourself, you know, like going to meet yourself, like going to meet yourself and like ask yourself like, oh, how do you want to be loved today? And like actually, how do you want to be loved forever? Like, and how are you feeling in these situations, like you asking yourself. Yeah, so I would say everybody should go on a date with themselves, you know? So go for therapy.
Yeah.
Try.
And I heard a saying that therapy is like a mirror.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
Absolutely.
like so when you say like it's a date with yourself, oh, that's the perfect way of saying therapy.
Yeah, I feel that way every time, so I'm like excited.
Okay, so thank you guys for that very illuminating conversation about therapy. And so whether you're in therapy or considering it or considering other ways to support your mental health, the most important thing is finding what works best for you. Hopefully today's conversation on The Usual Place gave you some food for thought. And for the first time, The Usual Place is doing a giveaway, and I've got exclusive McDonald's merch that was launched from McD's recent Lovin Me campaign. So what you'll get is a tote bag, a sticker sheet, 4 postcards, and a pack of F&B vouchers to feed yourselves at McDonald's. And I have 10 sets to give away, and it's very easy to get it. All you have to do is subscribe to ST Podcast YouTube channel now and leave a comment below about how you are taking care of your mental health. And I'll be in touch with the winners. So that's it from The Usual Place, and I'll see you next time.